Hello and welcome to the TaylorMade Workshops. My name is Paul Taylor and today I'm going to show you the fitting of my exhaust onto the BMW 1000rr. As you can see, we've removed the stock exhaust, which I think you'll have no trouble doing, and we're going to join the instructions on page 5, assembly. Over here we have the components laid out on the table. Here are the trim pieces and the stock body panels, and over here we have the components of the exhaust and the fittings. Now the procedure that I'm going to show you today is a little bit different from what's in the fitting instructions, and you may find it easier to do and save you time. However, either way is equally good. Now the first thing that we're going to do is just put a little dab of grease on this spacer, on the small spacer, which goes behind the radiator mount. Now the dab of grease is to just hold this spacer in place while we bolt the oil cooler mount on. So we've got the spacer in place behind the oil cooler mount, and now I'm just putting in the bolt and tightening it up. Now here you can see that the next thing I've done is mounted the spigots onto the cylinder head, all four of them, with the springs in their correct position. These are the muffler mounting brackets. There's a left-hand bracket and a right-hand bracket. Please note how they are different shapes. The mounting brackets bolt into the stock mounting points. This is the right-hand bracket, and right now I'm just going to put the bolt in finger tight. And similar. Here is the left-hand bracket being mounted in position. Again, just finger tight. To help assembly, I really recommend that you use a light oil like WD-40 around the slip joints. Just give it a quick dab and then mix it around. We also want to do the same with the slip joints of the muffler. Dab of oil, mix it around. After lubrication, join the headers into the mufflers. Just finger tight, again, just loosely, both sides, like that. You can see that with these headers I have already mounted the oxygen sensors, and this is ready to mount up onto the cylinder. Now take the assembled exhaust system, marvelling at how light it is, and thread the headers between the oil cooler bracket and up towards the spigots on the cylinder. Now engage, first of all, the right-hand pair of headers onto the spigots. Now make sure you haven't got the springs trapped in the headers. Pull it out of the way, and then mount the left-hand pair of headers onto the spigots. The next step is to mount the muffler strap over the muffler. And please note there is a tooling mark on the left-hand side of the strap. We just want to slip it over the back of the muffler and slide the strap down the muffler so that the holes are opposite the brackets. The spacing rod has a spacer on the left-hand side, so we're now going to mount this in between the brackets. The left-hand side uses the longer of the two bolts, and the strap goes on the outside of the bracket. So bolt through the strap, through the bracket, then the spacer, thread on the rod, just finger tight at this stage. Using a short bolt, the strap on the outside of the bracket, thread the bolt into the other side of the rod. Before tightening up the bolts, we just want to give it a wiggle to seat the muffler in the straps, and what you're looking for is the thickness of your finger from the exit to the rear tire, and just manipulate. You can pull the muffler in the strap to get the clearance necessary. So now we're ready to go around and tighten up the bolts. 10mm wrench, put that around the spacer, and then first tighten up the strap, and then tighten up the bracket bolt into the chassis. Repeat on the other side, on the left side. Now we have the muffler in place, go round and mount all of the springs with the spring puller provided, both at the muffler and at the headers. Reconnect the O2 sensor cables, make sure it's seated well, push the connector back on to the engine. And the same for the left hand side, follow the original cable routing, reconnect the cable, push the connector back on to the engine. Before installing the body panels, just pull back the insulation just around the rear of the fairing. When you replace the body panels, don't forget to reconnect the turn signals. The bodywork is now all back on, and there's just a couple of bolts that I haven't fitted. The one at the rear and this small bolt here at the back. I've tightened up the nuts on the end of the cables, and I'm just going to zip tie them back out of the way to the muffler mounting bracket. The right hand trim is mounted by this long bolt, and this is the stock washer from your exhaust, so retrieve that and place it over the bolt. Now the right hand trim fits inside of the stock bodywork, up behind the footrest and over the exit of the muffler. Just slip that over there, and now you can see it's held in place by the front of the carbon trim, and the stock bolt goes through the outside. The upper mount goes through the footrest, and the spacer is placed behind the footrest, and then the bolt goes through the carbon trim. At this stage you want to check that the exit of the muffler is making no contact with the carbon, and as you can see here, the exit extends beyond the carbon. Now, if the exit of the muffler is not central in the hole of the carbon trim piece, what we need to do is remove the carbon trim piece and then physically move the end of the muffler into position. Now, if your muffler exit needs some adjustment, we remove the carbon trim piece and just grab it and move it into the position it needs to be. This is perfectly safe to do, and it's really just centralizing the slip joints of the muffler onto the headers. We've got our muffler exit in position in the trim piece. We've got the top two mounting points bolted up, and the final one is underneath the trim and screws into the rear of the muffler. Once we have this one in, we then want to go around and tighten each of the three mounting points. Now we have the trim piece tightened up, we want to tuck in the insulation over the top of the overlap of the trim, and then this little trim grip, you can just push that to grip. Now on the left hand side we want to start with the stock bodywork just resting on the end of the gear shift lever. Slip the body panel up behind the side stand and then pull the side stand down as you push the trim piece forwards, making sure that the front goes inside of the belly pan. Now it's slipped all the way in. Pull the bodywork back up against the chassis, slip the front of the trim inside the bodywork, and you're ready to mount the bolt through both pieces. The rear of the left-hand trim pieces again mounts with a small screw onto the back of the muffler. Slip that in there. Okay. And at the front of the trim, we again want to push the insulation back over the top of the trim and pull the two pieces together with the trim grip. That goes over both the carbon trim and the stock bodywork. Once that's in position, just go back over and make sure that the panel bolts are tight. The final piece of the jigsaw is this stock bolt in the back of the belly pan. Just tighten that one up and then we're ready to go. Now we've got everything together, everything's mounted. At this point I usually take a cup of tea, of course, and then after tea I'd recommend that you come back and check that all of the bolts have been tightened. So let's just give it a quick going over, a little bit loose there, so check every bolt and then you're ready to fire it up for the first time. So let's hope we've done it all correctly. Okay, just before you set off onto the road, one thing to note is there will be a bit of smoking from the back of the exhaust. That's just the assembly oil burning off, and you may get some backfires initially, but after riding for about 50 miles, the fuel injection system will self-adjust to your new muffler and everything will work fine. Safe riding!